If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. This is part 4 of our series on the 7 habits of highly effective aging. The habits to be discussed include keeping self-esteem, maintaining fitness, being busy, remaining connected, being happy and making others happy, fighting for rights, and planning for fourth age. In this episode, we discuss habit 5, being happy and making others happy. So what are we up to? Habit 5? What is habit 5?
Habit 5, being happy and making others happy. According to the article, this is an important habit the third age elders must inculcate, as happiness is true significance of life. While life is a journey that has its moments of pleasures and sorrows, a matured elder must appreciate philosophy of life and try to be happy at all phases. Besides being happy, he/she should behave in such a way that always brings happiness on faces of others. Creating an ambience of happiness should be true motto of a third age elder. What is happiness?
Well, according to ChatGPT, happiness is a subjective experience in a positive emotional state characterized by feelings of joy, contentment, satisfaction, and well-being. It is often associated with a sense of pleasure, fulfillment, and a positive evaluation of one's life circumstances. Happiness can be influenced by various factors, including personal temperament, life circumstances, relationships, health, and external events. It is important to note that happiness is not a constant state, but rather a fluctuating emotional experience that can vary from moment to moment or over longer periods of time. Different people may have different definitions of happiness, and different factors can contribute to their overall sense of well-being. So that's kind of what ChatGPT says of happiness. And I think that's a pretty good definition.
Looks like ChatGPT also suggests that it can be categorized into 2 types, hedonic happiness and eudaimonic happiness. Hedonic happiness is a type of happiness that is associated with the pursuit of pleasure, enjoyment, and the absence of pain or discomfort. It focuses on maximizing positive emotions and minimizing negative emotions. It can involve seeking immediate gratification and engaging in activities that brings pleasure and satisfaction. Eudaimonic happiness is derived from a sense of purpose, meaning, and self-realization. It involves living in alignment with one's value, pursuing personal growth, and engaging in activities that provide a sense of fulfillment and contribute to the greater good. It goes beyond immediate pleasure and seeks a deeper sense of well-being and flourishing. Let's dive into these a little deeper and discuss how they affect how we can age well.
Sounds good. And for our long-term listeners, they might want to refer back to episode 13, which was titled The Hedonic Treadmill, or Happiness Set Point. And as some might recall, the hedonic treadmill is also known as hedonic adaptation. It is a psychological phenomenon that suggests that people's subjective well-being or happiness levels tend to return to a relatively stable baseline level. So kind of a set point, despite experiencing positive or negative life experiences or changes. This suggests that humans tend to return to a relatively stable level of happiness or subjective well-being despite changes in their circumstances or external conditions. So kind of looking at what ChatGPT points out about the two types of happiness, I think as we discuss in the podcast, are generally really both of those kind of blend together when we look at aging well.
Yeah. So would that be when you're saying that humans go back to their regular level of happiness? Is that saying that no matter how chaotic the world can be or how many curveballs things get thrown, we all go through those low times, but eventually we're going to go back up to our base level of happiness? Is that
Yeah, and the
correct?
same with the high points too. So if you are generally a Debbie Downer,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to return to that low kind of blah, kind of negative kind of attitude even after happy things happen. And you have other people who are just stuff can happen, as as Forrest Gump said, it happens. They they don't let it get it down. They generally return to a pretty high level. I had a colleague, Charlie, who I worked with at Eastern Michigan University, who uh, was always such a positive guy. I mean, I don't know if anything ever brought that guy down. And we would go for runs, and I would be venting frustration or something like that. And he's always like, well, yeah, but maybe they're just going through something, or, this, just like, dude, can't you just let me be negative for 5 minutes here? And it was really hard to be negative around him because his hedonic set point was so much higher. And so I
That's
think,
funny.
when we think in terms of the hedonic treadmill, it kind of suggests that external factors have a limited and only temporary impact on our overall happiness. And so how we determine to be happy is going to be really where we have set that treadmill. And I've read some articles where they say, to basically get off the hedonic treadmill. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think when we look at a hedonic treadmill, we think of it like exercise, where we want to kind of progress that level of happiness, that state of happiness, in an upward direction as we are attempting to age well. And so as a set point, it has to be triggered upwards, and it's going to have, adjustments. We're going to move it up, and then it's got to kind of stay stable, and we got to get used to being at that point, and then we move it up again. And, same thing can happen when people become negative. Is just stuff starts happening in their life. It starts kind of setting that treadmill down a bit, and then they get used to being there, and then more things happen. They get down again, and it just keeps moving them downward. And we have to really consciously take the effort to try and bring that level of happiness upward.
Kind of like an emotional homeostasis.
Yeah, I guess you could kind of call it that. That's what the hedonic happiness would be, is more of an emotional set point, or just kind of that steadiness. That a lot of times people will pursue happiness, and they can't grasp that their circumstances right now, how they could be happy in those situations. It's always, I'll be happy if I can get a new job, or if I can get a new home, or I can get a new car, and finding a partner will make me happy. And that's not where the source of our happiness really should be. And that's where we kind of jump into that eudaimonic happiness, is where we have a sense of purpose and self-realization, that is what drives our true happiness. Make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. I think, well, even that, it feels like we should be focused more on the eudaimotic happiness, because I feel like that is going to have way more of an impact versus the hedonic happiness. If you know your purpose, or you know your skill set, or you know your value, or you know what you're worth, that's going to have way more of an impact versus I have all these great things. I got everything in my life. Everything's going awesome, but something could be missing, right? That what is missing? What's that part in my heart, in my soul, that is missing, that's preventing me to get to that ultimate level of happiness?
Yeah, and I do think that both really need to be present in there. I think, we have to be, because sometimes people can overemphasize the sense of purpose and, this pursuit of meaning in life, and forget to kind of be happy. It's like, I don't generally feel like I have a pretty good sense of purpose and meaning in life and things like that. And I recall several years ago, it was raining, as it often does here in the Pacific Northwest. And I was driving along this one road near our home, and there's a lot of pine trees in this area, and the needles were kind of all over the road. And that combination of the moisture, the pine needles, and then just driving over them to kind of release that pine scent, it just, the scent really struck me. You hear people say, you got to take time to stop and smell the roses. I hadn't taken time to stop and smell the pine needles.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of just struck me as I need to kind of slow down and just kind of appreciate the now in my life. And so I do think there needs to be a little bit of that piece of both. And I also think that when we look at happiness, that overall happiness in life is a bit more of a asymptote, that we have to, that we can find things that can grow our happiness pretty quickly, but the more we achieve, the closer we become to fulfillment of that purpose, the closer we come to having all of the things that we need and want in life, the harder it is to really push that happiness up more. So at some point, you have to kind of become a little bit more content in kind of what you have.
Well, I think that also is part of the journey of aging well as well. Because I remember in my 20s just getting after everything, trying to find a new job, trying to find, places to live, and say, if I only had this, I'd be happier. If I only got paid this much, I'd be happier. And I was just work, 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 go, 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 go. But there was just something that was missing. And it wasn't until I came into my 30s where I started realizing like who I was as a person, what skill set I bring to the table, what I offer. And I started to become more comfortable in my own skin and not necessarily, I, I don't want to say I focused on the materialistic things. Because I haven't really been a materialistic person, but I would focus on a lot of earthly things, I guess you can say, like just being in the moment. And sometimes getting too wrapped up in the moment, you're surrounded by an environment or people, and yet you still feel alone. There's still something that you're like, I just feel out of place. I'm a square peg in a round hole. And then you just kind of in your 30s, I don't know, it's just been awesome. I feel like things that used to stress me out don't stress me out anymore. I feel like I have a more mature mindset. I feel like I'm a way more emotionally stronger. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what the next journey is going to be.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. And I think, again, that kind of goes back to a better understanding of that hedonic treadmill, that you can be kind of stuck in that same place, going the same speed, living in the same circumstances, the same level of happiness or unhappiness in your life. And, the hedonic treadmill really suggests that the external factors have really a limited and temporary impact on our overall happiness. And that's the thing that we should most consider, is that the things that are happening around us are only temporary. They're very limited. And I think we'll kind of get back to talking a little bit about my Haval a little bit more and how that plays into happiness. But as we adjust to kind of new circumstances, our expectations and desires are often kind of rise together with that, And so as things improve in our lives, we generally will tend to have more higher expectations, and it leads to this kind of constant pursuit of happiness. And that's where we can kind of get a little bit off base, is where we have this perpetual pursuit of happiness can create kind of a cycle where we're constantly looking for new sources of happiness, new sources of pleasure. We see this in individuals with drug addictions and how they can go from what some might call like a gateway drug into more severe drugs and more life-threatening types of drugs. We're constantly pursuing happiness or pleasure with this idea that it's going to significantly improve our well-being. And so as they adapt to these, they're looking for more happiness. And so that kind of puts them on this metaphorical treadmill, and they're constantly chasing happiness. And I think where we need to make the shift from a hedonic treadmill to a eudaimonic type of happiness, or say a eudaimonic treadmill, is that we begin to understand that happiness isn't dependent upon these external factors. It's dependent on our internal factors, and that we focus on cultivating things like gratitude. And again, I'll put my two T's in the gratitude, focusing on practicing acts of mindfulness, nurturing relationships, and engaging in meaningful activities that contribute to a long-term well-being and life satisfaction. And I think there's some things that we can maybe talk about. What are some of the keys to happiness?
Well, going back to what I was saying as far as being in my 20s and just kind of struggling through that, even in my teenage years, it's great now that I'm way more mature to use, as you say, that haval, like it is what it is, or let it go, or this too will pass, right? Because you're right, everything is temporary. But when the emotions are so high, it doesn't feel like it's temporary. It can get you so entirely worked up where you're like, oh my gosh, although this is emotionally stressful, this is putting a physical stress on me. And I think people have, for lack of a better word, I think it's not recognizing that this soon will pass, or it's not recognizing that this is only temporary. This pain or this uncomfortability, this is a temporary situation. And once you recognize that, it's one of the greatest feelings ever.
One of my favorite poets was a kid, Matty Stepanek, who unfortunately died several years ago. He had a rare form of muscular dystrophy, but in his short years, he wrote, I think it was like 5 different books he called Heart Songs, a bunch of poems. He was a kid who touched tons of people. I mean, he became really close friends with Jimmy Carter, and just amazing mindset in this kid. And one of his favorite lines were, always remember to play after every storm. And if you notice, as you walk in our entryway, there's a placard up there that says that. And it's a reminder as I come down the steps every morning to remember to play after every storm, because shit's going to happen in life, and we don't have control over that, but we have control over what happens next. And if you remember back to being a kid, how much fun it was to go out and play after a storm, play in the mud puddles and jump around, or even play in the rain. Obviously you don't want to be playing in the storm when the lightning's coming down and things like that, but to take some level of pleasure in the negatives that happen in our lives, because that is a fulfillment of our purpose. If we go back over the course of our lives and we look at the things that have happened, rather negative things, if we look at, had that not happened, where would we be today? Right. And we'd find it would probably be in a very, very different place. And it's hard to accept. And especially I have friends who have gone through just some horrific things. I have a friend who lost 2 children, and I think he grasps it, because his attitude, and his wife's attitude, their family's attitude through all of this has just been amazing. And it tells me that there's a greater purpose lying in there. And it's hard to accept that, losing a child can contribute to the good of the world, but it somehow does. And I think in the end, as the Bible says, all things work together for good. I think that kind of mindset helps us through the storms and helps us to understand how what is happening in this moment affects our purpose.
Man, I couldn't even imagine what it'd be like losing.
Yeah, I don't want to imagine what that would be like.
But kind of sticking up, man, I don't know how, it's not the same subject, but just having another mindset that every situation that we're placed in, you've obviously heard of the ripple effect, right? Where every action we do, it's like taking a stone or taking a little piece of rock and throwing it into a lake. It seems like just a little tiny harmless action, but as that splashes in, it causes a ripple effect, right? Super calm, clear lake, boom, one splash, and those ripples go all the way out to the banks of the lake. And, maybe they'll affect the fish underneath or the crawdads. Maybe it'll scare the ducks out of the way. No matter what we do in life, any type of action, it's like throwing that rock in. It's that ripple effect. We just got to own those actions, and we just got to let the outcome be whatever it is. Would you agree with that as part of aging well?
Yeah, I like the metaphor of the butterfly effect a little bit more because to me, the ripple effect, those ripples are temporary. And I would prefer to think that the impact that I have in a moment is going to have a lasting, permanent effect that moves through the universe in ways that I just can't comprehend. And I think when we have that kind of attitude, we can understand a little bit better how the circumstances that we're going through right now might be pretty crappy, but there's an ultimate purpose to them. And I always, when I think of purpose, I think of a capital P in purpose, so that it's much greater than just the word purpose. It's that it's something significant, that we have a place and a purpose in this life that interacts with the purposes and the lives of everybody else that we come either directly in contact with or indirectly in contact with.
One thing that you had also mentioned is you mentioned that people that kind of they're seeking for that happiness and that gratitude feeling, that instant gratification, and they dive into gateway drugs, which eventually leads into heavier drugs. And part of that addiction towards those drugs is going to be a dopamine spike. Now, I think it's really interesting that another thing that spikes dopamine levels is social media and stuff. There's a lot of research that's out there that a contributor to some of the anxiety or depression that's out in the world is people are so hyper focused on social media, whether they're wanting to see what the other person's doing, or maybe it's that FOMO, that fear of missing out, whatever it is spiking and dropping and plummeting and raising up and down that hedonic treadmill effect. I would say one of my best decisions I ever made was I just stopped being on social media. Still have them. I just haven't been on in 8 years. Man, what a completely different mindset. Just removed so much garbage from my life just by making that decision to stop going on.
There's good and bad in that. I mean, I take kind of the opposite approach. I am probably on social media more now than ever, but my goal in being on social media has changed. In the past, I've found that it was an avenue for me to kind of voice negativity and just vent a little bit. And I decided to kind of get away from that and try to use it as an avenue not only to make myself more positive, to feed my gratitude or my sense of happiness, but also to understand that if I'm unhappy, if I'm feeling really shitty today, then there's somebody else out there that's feeling pretty shitty today. And so I try and put some positive quotes on there on occasion. I will fairly often just simply put the statement out there, praying for some very special people. And I don't have to tell who I'm praying for, but in that act, I know that there are people out there that are going to receive that as like, somebody's thinking about me, somebody's praying for me, and it's going to help to elevate them. And I feel like I get some positive feedback from friends that, those kind of actions are rewarding and helpful. And I have plenty of other friends that do stuff like that on social media that just kind of make my day a little bit brighter. I have one friend from high school, got a new J through elementary school, through high school. He was in my homeroom. He'll almost daily put on some of these dad joke kind of statements on there that are just pretty hilarious, but there's kind of those funny, mind blowing, off the wall kind of statements. And it's like, I wish he knew how much I appreciate seeing those on a regular basis. I have, my friend Cindy, who I've mentioned several times, that has rheumatoid arthritis. She puts out some of the most positive stuff out there, just trying to lift people up. And I know the shit she's going through, but knowing that she's going through that and putting out these positive vibes, it makes me feel better. And it encourages me to do the same for other people. So I don't think that social media is bad and it is something that we necessarily have to escape from. That doesn't mean that you're escaping from it is a bad thing or that you should need to get back on it. But it's how we use the circumstances in our lives that dictate how happy they make us. And again, that is where that eudaimonic happiness kind of comes from. We have a little bit more effect on our circumstances, and everything isn't external. It's a bit more internal in terms of determining what our pleasure levels are going to be, what is our sense of well-being, and what is our purpose. And I think when we focus in on personal growth and trying to focus in on contentment, and contentment, oftentimes we think of, if I'm content, I'm just happy in my present circumstances. And that's kind of a hedonic approach to happiness, is just telling you, be content where you're at. And yeah, okay, stuff's going to happen, but the storm's going to pass and you'll be happy again. But that isn't necessarily improving on our level of happiness. It's not elevating our state of contentment and happiness. And so contentment doesn't have to be a fixed point in life. It, to me, is more of, like I've used repeatedly, the idea of an asymptote. Our happiness is an asymptote that we can continue to move toward it, and we're never going to hit that state of nirvana, where everything is just utopic and we're in a perfect state of happiness. We're always getting a little bit closer to that pursuit. And same with purpose. We never fully fulfill our purpose. We're always kind of getting close to it. And I think one of the keys to happiness is having contentment with a sense of what the Japanese called kaizen, trying to get better, be better at being happy, trying to be happy, but in the same process, trying to make others happy. And that's kind of one of those the other half of this habit is being happy, but also helping others to be happy. How does it say? Making others happy. Oftentimes when we think of happiness, we tend to be self-centered in our happiness, but there's also that need to be more other-centered in our happiness, to brighten other people's days. And when we brighten other people's days, it has an effect of brightening our own. Being that light in the world isn't just to draw attention to ourselves. It is to radiate that happiness, that state of love and being and contentment to other people.
So kind of like the metaphor, glass half empty, half full.
Back to that.
Right. Yeah. Well, we mentioned it and it actually turned into a pretty good conversation off the podcast. It ended up being a lot deeper than that, but it's kind of, I think I had mentioned, in that level of being content, you can either see your glass half empty or half full. And I was like, you know what, or you can change your perspective altogether and it's always full, right? It's full of half water and half air. It's always full. You can always change it into that positive. But what you're saying is, no, it's half full, but keep filling it. Keep filling it until it runs over. Keep filling it until it starts saturating everything around it and it starts overflowing to the point where the other cups start filling and it's giving more purpose. Like, get your cup overflowing, right? Is that what you're saying?
That wasn't exactly what I said when we had that conversation.
No, I'm saying, are you saying that now though?
Well, again, you start kind of getting into different metaphors with the cup being half full or half empty kind of thing. I like to approach it as the cup is constantly growing, and so it will never be full. And so as we look at happiness as, as that glass, our happiness, our capacity to be happy grows, and the things that fill and make us happy are growing, but there's that greater pursuit of not, again, if you look at it from a hedonic standpoint, you're always trying to fill that glass with things that make us externally happy, getting a new car, getting new clothes, finding new relationships, those types of things, rather than growing it more purposefully and making ourselves, happier with the circumstances that we have so that we can make others happier. I'm not sure if that's making any sense. We're kind of trying to pull that all into that analogy, but um, yeah, you could say kind of that, if the cup is running over and the cup is growing, then you are fulfilling that happiness. You are filling your life faster than you can set the goals to do that. And I don't think that's always going to be possible. I think as we seek to grow, again, understanding that happiness is that asymptote, or happiness is that constantly growing glass that is never going to be 100% full. But as we grow the glass, we are considering what is it that we are filling the glass with, what's making us happy, and what are we pursuing after in approach of that happiness. Are we trying to fill it with things, or self-satisfaction, or are we trying to fill it with gratitude and with the capacity to be more other-centered?
So here's a controversial question, but I think it's going to be really critical to dive into, especially if we're promoting aging well. Is happiness a mindset?
Absolutely. What else would it be?
Well, because some people might argue and say, well, how can you say that? I'm not happy. I suffer from depression, etc., etc., etc.
But where does depression arise from?
There we go.
It arises in the mind. And, so yes, depression is very much again, it's something that we would consider to be biopsychosocial, that there are biological contributions to one's depression. And if it is biological, yes, there are things that we can do to treat that, with, drugs or, pharmaceuticals that might help to regulate the brain chemistries that make someone less depressed. I think we've talked about the role of creatine in depression. And so, yes, there is a biological component to it, but we don't treat it entirely as biological. I think that's a big mistake in the medical community, is that you're depressed, here, take a pill. We also have to look at what are the psychological parameters, what are our sociological parameters that are contributing to that mindset. And so I like to say, choose to be happy. And I know for some that's a very difficult choice, but if you are suffering from depression, you do have the choice to let that depression suck you down even lower. And that's where, unfortunately, a lot of people in a depressed state end up taking their own lives. But we can also try and find our pathway out of that, to choose to be happy, to escape that depression. And what do we need to be able to do that? And sometimes it's, again, it's not something that is just so simple. I can sit here and say, choose to be happy when you're depressed, but surrounding yourself with the right people and trying to take on activities that are going to elevate our happiness, exercise, getting outdoors, better diet, as well as, seeking therapy, seeking social support. All those types of things can contribute to moving that person out of depression.
Well, you're right. I don't think it's that simple. And I don't think you're saying that at all. I think what you're saying is, don't find comfort in the darkness, and that's a lot easier said than done, but don't find comfort in that darkness, and don't submit to, that spirit of sadness. So whatever is holding you, don't submit to it, and don't find comfort in that. As easy as it is, because your body has a reaction when you're in that mindset of just, oh, everything sucks, I suck, blah, blah, blah. Don't go there. Start giving yourself positive affirmations. Start, as you said, joining a group. Find a purpose to get out of bed and go for it. And it just like man, what class did you take? Just like Bob. What about Bob? Baby steps, right? You don't have to see the entire stairwell to figure out what's up at the top. You just have to take those first couple steps and make your way there. And it could be a journey, and you might have to take a breather every now and then, but get to that destination. And I promise it's going to be worth it.
And happiness for everybody is a process. It's a series of choices. It's a series of actions. It's having a growth mindset. It's wanting to be in a better state than we currently are. And not only putting ourselves in a better state, but more importantly, attempting to elevate the state of other people, to make others happier. And so, whether we are in the first age, second age, third age, or even in the fourth age, I mean, people in the fourth age, oftentimes that's when people will find the most contentment and happiness. When they get to the end of their life and they look back and say, no, I'm ready to go. I've had a great life. I'm around good people. All I want is, my family to be around me as I pass through this last stage of my life and go to what's next in the universe for me.
Right.
And so having that mindset of wanting to be happy and make others happy is important no matter where we are in the various stages of life.
Well, you look at your most successful people, and, success comes in many different forms, but you look at the people that completely changed their life around. They were sick and tired of being sick and tired. And they were like, I want more. I want to be better, and I will be better. And there, you see several interviews with them because everyone sees their success, but no one actually sees the journey or the struggle. And they'll tell you, sometimes you're not motivated. Sometimes you want to stay in bed or you want to slack off. But if you have that goal and you have that dream and you can visualize it and you can see yourself being a better person, a happier person, or whatever the case may be, go for it. Don't let anything stop you from having that.
And I would also say that, we have to evaluate what is our definition of success. A lot of those people that you might on the surface appear to be success, they've got a nice big home, they've got, apparently a happy family and a nice car. They are some of the most miserable people on the earth. And some of the people that are the most happy are the people that have the least. And so success should be a matter of finding our purpose and finding our contentment in the circumstances that we have been put in. And so if we want to age well, let's focus in on being happy and making others happy.
Sounds like a pretty good process to age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.